this will be recalled throughout the the salvation history. Whenever they recall how God protected them in the 40 years of desert experience, and whenever they recall to mind the temple, they would think of the manna. And later, even after the destruction of the temple of Jerusalem, they will recall to mind a tradition based on Jeremiah. And later in the New Testament, chapter 6 of John would compare manna with the bread that Jesus gave to the people. And of course, there are other references to it in the letters of Paul and the book of Revelation as well. Okay, I will just share the screen. This is the 12th class of Exodus. I think the screen should be appearing in a second. Chapter 17 of Exodus. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. And whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with his sword. So we will take up this issue after getting back to the incident of manna. Okay. The second part or the last part of chapter 16, where I stopped in the last class, I mentioned about Omer, the container for collecting manna. It would be enough for a family for the entire day. At the end of this chapter 16, uh, the biblical author gives us a very important information about the type of manna and the a command to remember this for all generation to come, and it will be one would one would find it interesting. Although in this chapter we have two incidents of God providing the quail uh, for food and manna also for food, it will be manna that will be remembered for all generations to come. Okay, so manna is described as something like coriander seed, white in color, tastes like wafers made with honey. I will read verse 31. The house of Israel called it manna. It was like a coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Um, Now, in Numbers chapter 11:8, people ground this manna that they had gathered, making it into cakes that tasted like cakes baked with oil. This is a different tradition in the book of Numbers. Yahweh commanded an omer of manna to be kept for the generations to come. Please mark this. This is the text that I'm going to explain for a minute. Yahweh commanded an omer of manna to be kept for the generations to come. Why did God command Moses for this? Because future generations could see the bread that Yahweh had given them in the desert. Okay, you might ask me, in the last class we saw that this food cannot be preserved for a following day except on the eve of the Sabbath. So how could this bread be preserved for centuries? Okay. That could be a question that might germinate in the mind. Future generations could see the bread Yahweh had given them in the desert. Then Aaron, at the command, put the jar of manna in front of the testimony. That is what the footnote of NRSV will give us. Aaron put the jar of manna in front of the testimony, or it's translated as a treaty or covenant. For safekeeping, NRSV text. Covenant or treaty. In chapter 31:18, it is called as tablets of law. The testimony or covenant or treaty that will be called tablets of law. What is this actually? The jar of manna should be kept inside the ark, and that ark is called the Ark of Testimony. The stone tablets that Moses received from God on Mount Sinai containing commandments were called the tablets of testimony or the Ark of the Testimony. So the two stone tablets containing the 10 commandments. So placing the jar of manna in front of the testimony might have meant placing it in front of stone tablets inside the ark. So in the ark, there is already the 10 commandments or two tablets. And in front of the 10 commandments in the ark, this jar containing the manna is also placed. Now we have a problem. We are now in chapter 16. Soon after they begin their journey in the wilderness after crossing the Yam Suf, the sea, the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds. They have not reached Mount Sinai. They have not experienced the revelation on Mount Sinai. God has not made them people of his own people, not made the covenant. So where is the ark? So no ark had been made, and no commandment, the two tablets of commandments were given to Moses. This is what we called an example of anachronism. And we have a number of such incidents in many parts of the Bible. So this is one example of anachronism. What is anachronism? The action of attributing something to a period to which it does not belong. The action of attributing something to a period to which it does not belong. Example of anachronism. For example, if I were to say that I am in Bangalore, in Karnataka, I say Tipu Sultan was the ruler of Karnataka. It is an example of anachronism because the state of Karnataka did not exist when Tipu was the ruler. He was in Mysore, and Mysore was the state that was called as the country or the state of Mysore. This is an example of anachronism. Okay, such things do exist in the Bible because they were written down much later based on several traditions. Okay, now the Aaron's rod also was kept in front of the testimony. So that is coming up from Book of Numbers. So we're just trying to see in the later tradition the things that were placed in the uh, ark, in the ark. Okay, the two stone tablets, the two stone tablets, the jar of manna, and according to Numbers chapter 17, Aaron's rod, 17:10. The Lord said to Moses, "Put back the staff of Aaron before the testimony, to be kept as a sign for the rebels, that you may make an end of their grumblings against me, lest they die." So it's the commanded by Yahweh to place the staff of Aaron too before the ark of the testimony. In Kings chapter, First Kings actually, chapter 8, verse 9, and Second Chronicles 5:10. These two texts tell us that there was nothing in the ark except the two stone tablets. So it's a different tradition. Different tradition. So the Book of Kings and Chronicles. So coming from two uh, uh, traditions of history. The Book of Kings, the two books of Kings, come from a set of history in Israel called Deuteronomistic history. History based on the book of Deuteronomy, that is Joshua, Judges, First and Second Samuel, and First and Second Kings. Then, Book of Chronicle and both the books of the Chronicle come from another source of history called chroniclers history in Israel. So other two books in the chroniclers history are Ezra, Nehemiah. So Ezra, Nehemiah, First Chronicles, Second Chronicles, they come under a category called chroniclers history. Now, these two different types of history, historical books, historical tradition, tell us that there wasn't anything in the ark except the two stone tablets. Now let us go to the tradition in the New Testament. Book of the author of the letter to the Hebrews give us a different vision, a more elaborate vision of the ark. So the ark contains the gold jar of manna, First, then Aaron's staff that had budded the stone tablets of the covenant. So that's a New Testament vision. The jar of manna, Aaron's staff, and the stone tablets of the covenant. The Jewish tradition. That's good that you come to know this, because I know many people have asked me in the past with regard to the existence of the Ark of the Covenant today. There are different stories, because the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed in 587 by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, and later in 70 AD it was destroyed by the Romans. And after these two destructions, where are the holiest of the holies, the Ark of the Covenant, the Ten Commandments? The Jewish tradition tells us that Jeremiah has taken and kept the ark with its contents before the destruction of the temple. We know that the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in 587 BC. Now, this is a tradition that was not written down earlier, but it was an oral tradition that Jeremiah was the one who kept the ark. So this will be written down in the book of the Maccabees. So this tradition will be later written down. And because that was the belief of the Israelites. Now, this Ark of the Covenant will be seen again at the arrival of the Messiah. So till Messiah comes, this Ark of the Covenant will be hidden, and nobody will know where Jeremiah has placed it. So remember, that is why in the Gospel according to Matthew, when the identity of Jesus is questioned, or Jesus asks his disciples to indicate what people say about Jesus, the disciples say, yes, they also think of him as Jeremiah come back to life. And here is a clue that Jeremiah knows who the Messiah is. Okay, Jeremiah is also the prefiguring of the Messiah, and when Messiah comes, the Ark of the Covenant also will be revealed, which is hidden, and the secret is not revealed to anyone. That is why in the book of Revelation, chapter 11, John says he has seen the ark of in the temple in his vision. So that means Messiah is already there. He has come. Now this manna has a different implication in the New Testament, as I just mentioned. In the sixth chapter of John, which is a long treatise on the Eucharist, after the multiplication of the loaves, Jesus tells that Jesus is the bread from heaven that gives true life to the humanity. Because the ancients in the desert ate the manna, but they still died. But Jesus, who gives his bread, and people who eat the bread that Jesus gives, which is his body, will not die. So the jar of manna kept for later generations anticipates the Christian tabernacle, where the Eucharistic bread is being kept for those who are absent from the celebration of the local faith community. When the Holy Eucharist was celebrated only once a week, that's on the seventh day, on Sunday, not all people could be present for the Eucharist. The uh, those who were sick, disabled, and the old people could not participate in the Eucharist. So for them, the Eucharistic bread was preserved in the tabernacle, and throughout the centuries, in every Catholic church, you find a tabernacle which contains the sacred body of Jesus, which is preserved after the Eucharistic celebration. This tabernacle is the living presence of Jesus. In the Old Testament, the jar of manna represented the providence of God, how God gave them food throughout the 40 years. So the Israelites were given manna about a month after their departure from Egypt, and this will continue for the entire 40 years of their sojourn in the wilderness. That's what verse 36 tells us. For 35. The Israelites ate manna 40 years until they came to a habitable land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. But Joshua tells us in the book of Joshua, chapter 5, manna stopped immediately after they entered the promised land under the leadership of Joshua. Why? Now they have reached the land of promise. They need to cultivate and eat bread for, prepare bread for themselves and eat from the bread that they make. All the possibilities are given to them by God. So God need not now mouth feed them. God does not have to give them, but they can cultivate. The land is given to them, fertile land. So the reason why manna stopped immediately after they entered the promised land. Now we go to the next chapter, chapter 17. There are two incidents here in chapter 17. This chapter 17 also, there is a mistake. It's chapter 17, verse 1 to 16. It's a mistake. 17, 1 to 16. There are only 16 verses in the chapter 17. There are different trying experiences that they encounter in the desert. And the first one is the lack of water, and they grumbled against Moses at a place called Massa and Meribah. These two places will be remembered centuries and millennia later. Now, these incidents tell us, they describe Yahweh's graciousness to his needy people. So this is a narrative to tell us that Israel's thirst was quenched with water from the rock. The parallel passages are there in Numbers chapter 10. Appears as a quarrel with Moses and demand that Moses meet the needs of the people. When you read through this text, unlike the one in the book of Numbers has a parallel passage. Uh, Parallel to this is found in the book of Numbers, chapter 20. The explanations are different. Here, it's a quarrel with Moses, and people are demanding that Moses meet the needs of the people. And Moses cries out to God. And it's very similar to what Moses did, very similar to what Moses did in chapter 14, verse 15. In chapter 14, verse 15, Moses cried out. And the Lord said, "Why do you cry out to me? Tell the people to go forward because they're confronting the mighty army of Pharaoh behind and in front the ocean, the sea." He said, "Okay, lift up your staff," and all that we know in chapter 14. And God solved the problem of the Israelites. Very similar here. The answer is positive when Moses cried out to Yahweh. Uh, there in chapter 14, Moses was asked to extend the staff and lift, rather, extend the hand over the sea and divide it, and the Israelites could walk through the dry ground into the sea. So to here, Moses is commanded to strike the rock with his staff. Yahweh once again meets the needs of the people. What is the need of the people here? Water. In chapter 17, they are at a place called Rephidim. Rephidim, verse 1. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. Verse 2 says, they quarreled. People quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Please note in verse 5 of the story, there is no reprimand. God does not get angry with Moses or the people. The Lord just listens and finds a solution. There is no indication of punishment. He says, God tells Moses, "Go on ahead of the people. Take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile and go. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it, so that the people may drink." So there is no indication of any punishment. However, in verse 3, there is a secondary tradition of rebellion. What is that? The people complained against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt? Why did you bring us out of Egypt?" This is a basic problem. A secondary tradition of rebellion. I have mentioned about this rebellion many times. Rebellion will continue several times and much more powerfully in the book of Numbers. Here in verse 3, the central attention is not the thirst of the people. The thirst serves as a backdrop for the theme of rebellion. People rebel several times, recalling the event of Exodus. Why did you ever make us leave Egypt? We would have been happy with the flesh pots of Egypt. Here, the theme of rebellion. Please remember, repeated question. Why did you ever make us leave Egypt? I mentioned this in the previous class. A group of people who have lived through the experience of slavery for 400 years, find it very difficult to get accustomed to the newfound freedom. Exodus, or the coming out of Egypt, is the object of attack of the people against Moses. Okay, indirectly, it is an attack on God Himself. It's not Moses who really took the initiative. God wanted Moses. God initiated the process and asked Moses to be the mediator. Now, the two places that are mentioned, verse 7, he called the place Massa and Meribah. The place is named both Massa, the meaning of the place, meaning of the name, term Massa in Hebrew is test, uh, and Meribah means to find fault, find fault. So Massa and Meribah will be remembered for centuries and millennia to remind the people of Israel regarding their faithlessness and their infidelity and their rebellion against Yahweh. That's why in you umpteen texts from the Old Testament keep on they keep repeating the name of Massa or Meribah or together. So Massa means test. Meribah means to find fault. I will give Psalm 95:8. I suppose, I guess many of you who are, some of you who are listening to me are religious people who have maybe going through the invitatory Psalm 95 for the morning prayer. And this part of the text is recited whenever you read make use of Psalm 95 as the invitatory Psalm. Uh, do not harden your hearts. Is missing from there. Okay. Do not harden your hearts as at Meribah, as on that day at Massa in the wilderness, when your fathers put me to the test and put me to the proof, though they had seen my work. Centuries later, Psalm 95, and that's not the only Psalm, there are also other Psalms, but just as a sample, Psalm 95 states this, recalling the what the fathers have tried to put God to the test. So remember these two places, Massa and Meribah. They recall to mind uh, people complaining and making rebellion against God and Moses. Where is there are a lot of issues with regard to location. We are not entering into that issue, but traditionally, Meribah was one of the springs at Kadesh, Numbers chapter 20. I said the parallel passage is in chapter 20, but interpretation is different. And so Mara and Massa, we saw Mara in chapter 16. Mara and Massa were evidently springs at the same oasis. Mount, according to this map, in the Sinaitic Peninsula, a place called Meribah. Massa and Meribah are close by. They are very close to the same oasis. Uh, maybe a point that I would like to highlight here. There are a number of complaint stories in the book of Exodus and Numbers. The complaint stories stress Moses as a prophetic mediator between the Lord and the people. Prophetic mediator. So when people have a problem against Moses, rather against God, they come to Moses. Moses is the mediator. So Moses will take the issues to Yahweh, and the response God will give to Moses, and Moses will relay it over to the people. So Moses, in all these complaint stories, plead. Moses pleads before the Lord. The pattern is there. Moses pleads before the Lord, and the Lord answers. In the rain-starved Middle East, water was a source of strife. Maybe I'll spend a couple of minutes with you about the implication of this incident of water, God providing water, and the importance of water for Israelites. Um, the section, the chapter 17, the first part, 1 to 7, ends on the assumption that the people are satisfied. They are happy with the intervention of Yahweh through the instrumentality of Moses. Moses acts correctly and at the proper time. He responds to the needs of the people. So please, when you get time, get back to Numbers 20. There you will find a great contrast. Okay, it is when you read Numbers chapter 20, you feel pity for Moses, because a person who spent all his life, 40 years in the wilderness of the Midianites, preparing himself for the Exodus event, and another 40 years wandering with the people in the Sinaitic area, getting their complaints. And this same Moses acts, or this incident is taken as the disobedience of Moses. And that's the reason why Moses will not be allowed to, Moses will not be allowed to enter the promised land. Very, very sad situation. Moses, the hero, will be prevented from entering the promised land. Now, the contrasting accounts of chapter 17 in Exodus and chapter 20 in Numbers, because of the contrasting purpose of both the books. While Exodus speaks of the graciousness of God to respond to the needs of the people, the Numbers will prove disappointment. People are disappointed, And Yahweh is disappointed with the people because Yahweh continually followed them up. They were never satisfied. So uh, uh, the grumbling tradition, the rebellion motive, they are very strong in the book of Numbers. Now let's look at the water in the Exodus for a moment. No? Why? This chapter 17, we already saw two incidents of water stories in the Exodus. Soon after the miracle at the sea, we already saw in Mara where water was bitter and it was turned sweet. At Meribah, Massa, and Meribah. So it begins in the Exodus begins with the order of Pharaoh to throw all male children into the Nile. Chapter 1, verse 22. We know the response of people. In next chapter, chapter 2, water is used to save Moses. Yeah. Originally, all Hebrew male children should have been destroyed by throwing them into the river Nile. And paradoxically, it was through water that Moses was saved. And the same Moses will have an interesting experience in the Midianite land while helping to water the flock of the Midianite priest. And as a result, Moses is taken to the home of the Midianite priest, offers hospitality. He is offered hospitality, and he is also given the daughter of the Midianite priest as his wife. Her name is Sipporah. And through Sipporah, he will also have a son called Gershom. We have seen that. Then it is through water that the very first plague was introduced. It involved turning water into blood. Then we saw the law after the 10th plague. They are after the escape from Egypt, while making a way through the waters of Yam Suf, Red Sea or Sea of Reeds, that Yahweh saved Israel from the Egyptian forces. Then finally, in chapter 15, the entire chapter 15, there are two songs of Moses and Miriam called Song of the Sea. Water problem again after they moved out of the sea. First at Mara in chapter 15, water is turned into sweet. The bitter water is turned to sweet. Chapter 15. Then chapter 17 at Rephidim, the last incident of Yahweh providing water from the rock. So water is a very major element, a very major element in Exodus. And not in Exodus, we know that it began with God putting order in the chaotic waters, Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, and so on. See? So, this water from Old Testament will come to the New Testament as a very important, very important element. Because just as Yahweh provided the Israelites with water from the rock to quench their thirst, life giving water flowed from the side of crucified Jesus. Now we are in the Lenten season, and we are meditating on the passion, death, and the resurrection of Jesus. And so soon we will be reading from John chapter 19 and 19. Chapter John 19:34 speaks about the life-giving water, flowing from the side of Jesus. Later, it will be connected to baptism, water of baptism. That is in the water of baptism that Christians die with Christ and rise with Him to a new life. Okay, so this is the implication of this element of water in the book of Exodus that we have seen, chapter 1 to chapter 17, and its implication also for the New Testament and the Gospels. Okay, now chapter 17 and chapter 18 take place in a place called Rephidim. Place called Rephidim. So this map gives us information that from Rephidim, it's only a 25-kilometer journey to Sinai, Mount Sinai. Okay, this map tries to not only to locate Rephidim, but also to place it in the time frame. So 42nd day to the 46th day from Goshen, or 17, between 17 and 21 days from Red Sea. So it was in Rephidim, the first one we have seen, chapter 17. They grumbled for water. And the next incident is the attack of Amalekites. That's the incident that we are going to see now. And that concludes with Moses building an altar, and that is a famous event in the book of Exodus. So after the victory over the Amalekites, and because that is a victory that takes place sheerly or merely out of a miracle, and that will be remembered graphically. We will see that Moses building an altar at the end of the war. Then in chapter 18, the father-in-law of Moses, the Midianite priest, will come with the wife of Moses and his son. Then they will have that encounter, the whole beautiful encounter in chapter 18. Then Moses is not only a prophet, he also will be a judge. Okay, all that will take place in a place called Rephidim. So remember this place, Rephidim, because the several events are going to take place in a place called Rephidim, which is only, according to this map, just 25 kilometers away from Mount Sinai. Okay, we move to the next incident of battle with the Amalekites from verse 8 onwards. This is significant because in a situation of sometime discouragement, um, great human accomplishment is highlighted. Uh, there is awesome display of divine power that Yahweh manifests. So, the main purpose of this story, the story of battle and victory against the Amalekites, is to edify the heroic stature of Moses. Moses is not only a simple leader, but he is also a hero who has the power to even defeat great armies. Um, the theology that we encounter here is that salvation involves an interplay of two things: divine grace and human cooperation. So, without human cooperation, no divine grace comes, and no human activity is successful without the help of divine grace or assistance. And that is the message that we get from this battle against the Amalekites. Who are the Amalekites? Who are the Amalekites? The Amalekites are a fierce desert tribe that claimed control over the wilderness in the region of Kadesh. We have the information about the region of Kadesh from Genesis 14, Numbers 13, and other texts. Uh, these Amalekites were definitely a very powerful people compared to the, the former slaves, the Israelite group. This story explains Israel's implacable hatred of the Amalekites and the origin of a particular type of altar in the region of Rephidim. What we can call it as etiology, origin of or something. In this case, an altar that existed. This interesting picture, the ray, is the representation of the powerful intercession of Moses. Moses as a great mediator and intercessor. Those of you who have read the story will see how, in order to have victory over the Amalekites, Moses, of course, could not fight directly. So he sits on a rock, and as long as his hand is raised up, Israel prevailed. And whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. Moses' hand grew weary, and so what do? They took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. That's a picture of Moses sitting on a rock, and two people, Aaron, Aaron and Hur, two people, Aaron and Hur hold up the hands of Moses, one on one side and the other on the other side. So his hands were steady, because we said the moment his hand came down, the Amalekites prevailed. So they had to hold on both, so that Israel could claim victory over the Amalekites. And it went on till the sunset. And verse 13, Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the sword. And this was the text that I also gave as a theme for today's class. Okay. I come to the story of sorry, 1 second. Sorry, a little technical problem, I think. Okay. Um, okay, we come to the second part of this story of fight against Amalekites, the story of Amalekites. So we saw the interesting story of how Moses, the hands of Moses were held up by two of his collaborators, because it is actually it is in this text that we come to know of Joshua for the first time. Joshua is Joshua is mentioned for the first time here. Okay. Um, so the entire movement centers upon Moses. So somehow the focus is not on Yahweh. Focus is on Moses. In fact, it's in verse. If you look at verse 9, Moses commissions Joshua to make the battle preparations, and then he adds that Moses will take a particular position, a strategic position in the nearby hill. So we are not given details about the battle, but there is abundant description about the contribution of Moses towards the successful outcome of the war. So it is the Moses's tenacity and steadfastness that will finally get the day for Israel. And imagine this elderly man, his stamina for keeping his hands raised, of course, with the support of Aaron and Hur. Looks as though such kind of a stamina that you would expect from a giant throughout the day, holding the hands up. So, in verse 12, there is a statement about the steady hands, the steady hands of Moses. This steadiness described in the account is the faithfulness. So, this steadiness and the faithfulness of Moses are interrelated. You know, that verb is repeatedly used in the Bible, in the Old Testament, to show the fulfillment of a task, an official task that is entrusted. And this term is also to show the courage of the person who turns the tide of the battle. Hmm? So, or we have seen several times, or we are going to also see several times, Moses would fail. But for all the failures of Moses, this story of struggle against the Amalekites will retain the image of Moses as a hero and like almost like a Superman. Now, just a word about these Amalekites. Amalekites, they control the caravan routes. They said they are fierce tribals. So they control the caravan routes between Egypt and Arabia, and they lived in an area called Negev, which is the south of Israel, north of Egypt. We have that. We have that statement information from 1 Samuel chapter 15. So, since they are linked to the tribe of Judah, they are also associated with the Exodus tradition. So there is an issue of why this, why the Amalekites are mentioned in this story. So we shall not bother much about it. We shall concentrate on the portrait of the heroic qualities of Moses. Okay, before I go to chapter 18, where Moses is meeting his father-in-law Jethro, I would take up some questions if you have. I'll take a little pause. I have a question already. Okay, Brother Samuel.
Yeah. We begin from last. Why God is so harsh on Moses by merely striking the rock twice and being prevented entering the promised land compared to his 40 years hard works in the wilderness? Isn't God is a merciful God?
Uh, okay, let's not enter now in the 20th chapter of Numbers. Let's now concentrate on the book of Exodus, where God's graciousness and mercy are pictured. I told you the book of Exodus is a book of graciousness. Numbers, the theme is different. So the each context is different, even though the text may be same. So I wouldn't like to say that God is harsh. Yeah, when you read book of Numbers only, then this will be there. But maybe sometime later, before we conclude the book of Exodus, I hope to tell you something about it.
Moses could have continued the intercession, raising his hands. Oh, why is so much importance given to it when God can hear without hands being raised?
Yeah, I mentioned a couple of slides earlier that in the history of salvation, divine grace and human cooperation are intermingled, intertwined. There is both these elements of human cooperation and divine grace. Okay, in theory we can say, or we also know, God really does not need our cooperation. No, one word, God is all powerful, all omniscient. He knows everything. But that is not the way in the Bible things take place. God seeks the help of the human being, and events take place with the support of the human beings. God could have directly come, but he made use of so many people: Moses, Aaron, Pharaoh, Pharaoh's daughter, the two midwives, Shiprapua, so many other people that we are going to see. God sent prophets after prophets. So that's a theology of the Bible, that God needs, or God makes use of human cooperation. So there is a mixture, a perfect combination of divine grace and human cooperation.
And thus, the presentation of Jesus in the temple represent the arrival of the covenant. The presence of God, which left the temple before 587 BC, has again re-entered the temple.
Brother, could you repeat once again?
Thus, the presentation of Jesus in the temple represent the arrival of Ark of the Covenant. The second part is the presence of God, which left the temple before 587 BC, has again re-entered the temple.
Yeah, I think the what you're saying is about maybe an interpretation, which is not the interpretation of the um, account in the Gospel according to Luke. Um, there, the okay, if we could get that, maybe that explanation is possible, but I don't think that is the dominant explanation of that chapter. Jesus is presented in the temple as per the custom of the firstborn to be presented, and Mary and Joseph, following the provision of the law, the demands of the law, because they are law-abiding Jewish people, they present Jesus in the temple. Then, with regard to the God leaving the temple, yeah, that is a later theology that was in the prophetic literature. That's because the people in Babylon questioned um, the prophet and questioned God. God, why you could not save yourself? Are you not more powerful than are you not more powerful than Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon? So the fact that Nebuchadnezzar was able to destroy the temple, destroy the city, burn down the temple, take people into captivity, is it not a proof that Nebuchadnezzar is more powerful than you, God? This is the question that they asked on in the banks of rivers of Babylon. And Ezekiel, Prophet Ezekiel, is trying to find an answer to this problem. So he's telling, no, nothing happened to God. God left the temple before Nebuchadnezzar came there. Why? Because he was tired of the abuse of worship. Only the sacrifices that you made were without any any sense. They were devoid of any spirituality. So it was nonsensical to remain in the temple. So Ezekiel would bring this idea that God left the temple already or before the arrival of Nebuchadnezzar. So it was easy for Nebuchadnezzar to destroy this temple. So that is a later explanation that Ezekiel gave, and that's a theology. So to show that it's not Nebuchadnezzar who is powerful than God, but God willed that the temple be destroyed because God is no more in the temple. So in that sense, maybe you could say that Jesus is coming back to establish the presence of God in the temple and so on. Okay.
Next is Omer, the vessel which the Israelites used. Is it still being used in the present times during the Passover?
Uh, no, there is no reference to that. No. It's a Omer is as we saw in chapter yeah, it's a small clay vessel. So, however more, however less you collect in this vessel, it is sufficient for the family. So it's not now it is not used. Okay, but it was used to collect manna. Okay, so I don't know. I'm not aware of the use of it in today's Passover celebration.
Next question. How could the jar of manna be preserved? How could the jar of manna be preserved?
Uh, I think some of you may be aware of so-called Eucharistic miracles. You know, some of the miracles, Eucharistic miracles that took place in the Middle Ages and even earlier, they are served even today, and they are see. You remember the wafer, the wheat bread that we use for Holy Communion. They don't last too long. If these Eucharistic miracles have remained for several centuries and intact even today, um, available to the human sight and touch even today, it's called as a miracle. Okay, so Israelites believe that is a miracle that this jar of manna remained for several centuries. So take it as a special miracle or God's providence. Because the purpose is Yahweh Himself is asking, preserve this for what? To tell the people that God fed them with this manna for 40 years. Okay.
And this question is similar with the last. Nevertheless, last. It is unfair that one deed of anger, disobedience on part of Moses did not permit him to enter the promised land. Moses was human. The judgment is unfair.
Yeah. I agree with you. I agree with the statement. You know, this is a human way of give an explanation why Moses, the great hero, was not allowed to enter the promised land. So the book of Numbers is trying to find an explanation. It's an explanation to say why the great hero of the Exodus was not allowed to enter the promised land. So yeah, it looks sounds very inhuman. Let's say inhuman and unjust. I think. Yeah, it looks as though, but I say it's an explanation.
In chapter 17, verse 14, what is the hearing of Joshua referring to? What is the hearing of Joshua referring to? Chapter 17,
Yeah,
verse
sorry.
14.
I did not complete that. I did not mention that. Okay, I should mention that. Um, it's a see. This is another example of let's say etiology. Etiology. An explanation of something that has taken place. Um, he says, write this as a reminder in a book and recite it in the hearing of Joshua, because Joshua was the hero of the battle. So I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. So Moses was spiritually guiding it. It was under Joshua that the victory was achieved. There, the second part of that 14 to 15, so especially verse 15, say, the existence of an altar, existence of an altar in the Sinaitic area. And there, interestingly, the name of the altar is the Lord is my banner. The Lord is my banner, because he said, a hand upon the banner of the Lord. Um, hand of the banner of the Lord. So exactly the Hebrew word is not translated, at least NRSV says, they really don't know the exact meaning of the Hebrew word, but they have given it like a banner of the Lord. The so just like the jar of manna is a reminder of the God's gratuitous providence of Israel for 40 years. The um, the victory of Moses and Joshua against the Amalekites also will be remembered. That's why he said, write it down. Write it down. Now, what I want to highlight is more this, the, the, the intercessory power of Moses. Okay, that is highlighted. Such the picture that I placed there. I gave what the slides I gave. The um, the hands of Moses being held high has been um, the act of the Moses hand held high has been interpreted symbolically as a gesture of prayer. It's a gesture of prayer that has led Israel's to victory. This is highly symbolic, highly symbolic. So, this is used throughout the biblical tradition to show prayer with perseverance. Prayer with perseverance will bring success, and God will look kindly on prayer with perseverance. So many preachers throughout have taken this as a model of the intercessory prayer, the model of perseverance in prayer.
Next, very often many were killed just to save the Israelites. I hope it is fair. That's the question.
It's not fair. Today we don't say it that in order to save one group, you have to kill several others. Okay. Today's sensibility is different. The time of the ancient Near Eastern countries, the traditions. It was the order of the day. See, morality changes. Morality, understanding of morality changes. So here, the victor is writing the story. So the how is the victory achieved? By exterminating all elements of the enemy. So it is an exaggerated way of saying that God was very powerful. So all the enemies of the Israelites are annihilated. They are removed from the face of the earth. It is to be taken as an exaggeration.
Is placing the jar in the ark same as having the Blessed Sacrament in the tabernacle?
Yeah, if you take the account of the letter to the Hebrews, where he is speaking about the golden the jar of manna, the Aaron's rod that budded, and the Ten Commandments, the two tablets of stone. So today, the theology, Catholic theology, will find a similarity. Okay, in many of the churches today, you have on one side the tabernacle, which contains the sacred body of Jesus, the tabernacle. Then on the other side, we have something similar where the word of God is kept. So the God's word represented as Bible. So in the Old Testament, it would be like the Ten Commandments, the two tablets of stone, God's word, and manna. The New Testament will take symbolic meaning from there. Just like in the ark, you have the word and manna. So here is the Bible and the sacred body, the tabernacle.
They ate manna until they came to the border of Canaan. Manna ceased on the day they ate produce of the land of Canaan. Why the difference, as what could they eat if manna ceased on their reaching the border of Canaan?
Yeah, it's a way of saying in the Exodus that they don't take it literally. They are using a language um, that God provided them with manna in the desert. So, chapter Exodus is highlighting the experience of Israel in the desert. They are not telling us about what happened later. What they are highlighting the fact that God has provided them with the food for their journey. Now, book of Joshua will tell us that now they entered the promised land, they have produced, they have cultivated, and now they don't need any more of a special protection of God's providence in the form of manna because they are able to produce. Again, the combination of divine grace and human cooperation.
This question was for
Yeah, I think
explain.
it's almost it's time.
Yeah.
It's
There
time.
is one more, Father.
Yeah, there's one more. Okay, we'll take it up.
The Lord is my banner. Is it Yahweh in Hebrew?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Jehovah Nissi, God is my banner. Yeah. Okay, so in the and now from this chapter onwards, now 18 onwards, I will go much faster. I will take important events and then we go to chapter 20 because a few incidents are in 18 and 19. Chapter 20, we already come to Mount Sinai, where the Ten Commandments are given. And then in the soon after that, a very important code, CODE. There are three important codes in the Pentateuch. The oldest and let's say the most important is the covenant code that is from chapter 20, from 20 verse 22 going up to chapter 23 of Exodus. There is a second code is the Levitical code in the book of Leviticus, chapter um, yeah, chapter 16 to 27, or it's also called Holiness Code. Then third one is the Deuteronomistic Code, Deuteronomy Code, the book of Deuteronomy. So there are three major legislations, and so that we will see the covenantal code from Exodus. We'll see in the coming class. So we'll see the how this social justice was so inherent in the psyche of or the DNA of the Israelite people right from the beginning. So it might appear as a body of legislation, but I will point out some of the important features of this in the coming days. So till then, uh, Shabbat Shalom, and may God bless. And tomorrow is the fifth Sunday of Lent. We are coming close to the greatest mysteries of our redemption. So enjoy the weekend and let's come back for the coming class next week.
Okay. Thank you, Father Shabu. Let us end with a prayer. God of all blessings, source of all life, and giver of all grace, thank you for this beautiful evening. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Once again, thank you.
I will leave it.